Once you're in a situation like that, where your entire world around you is externally developed, you generally develop narcissism because you don't have the ability to feel for yourself. Therefore, you don't have the ability to feel for others. And you can fall victim to self-grandiosity because your ego has told you how great you are, how much you can annihilate others. And so you step into that embodiment that becomes your new identity, and everyone around you marvels and applauds it. What could be wrong with that, right? If everybody else around you thinks that that's okay, what's the problem? The truth is that it doesn't meet their needs. It's not meeting their needs, and they are still suffering. There is something inside of them that is still reaching out and hurting and trying, but they don't know how to fix it. When we look out at the culture, we see so many negative stories in the news, and oftentimes we see that men are the ones in these negative stories. Over time, people begin believing this is just human nature, but in truth, there's a story being told about men that just isn't fully true, and there's a very important reason for that. Mainstream culture doesn't want men to become this wise and powerful and empowered from inside of themselves. The reason is because keeping them in their ego helps this mainstream culture own and dominate men. It helps sell them a lie that they're dominating and winning, but really what's happening is they're being stolen from in a really sacred and important way. Because having worked with some of the most powerful and richest men in the world, I see their child within. I see what got left behind. I see what they suffer from silently. I see all of the things in front of them that they used to cope with life, but those things weren't working. They were causing so much more damage and harm. And so I feel this huge compassion in my heart for men, because it's truly a story that's not ever told. So I wanted to take a moment to examine this and to really help you understand what men need most. Young boys in our culture are typically trained to quiet their emotional feelings, to not show pain or what people might perceive as weakness. Now, emotions are very important because they hold the truth. Whatever you're suffering, mentally, physically, psychologically, your emotions can reveal that to you. So denying a young boy the ability to get in touch with his needs or his emotions or express that in a healthy way denies the boy the ability to develop an internal sense of self and an internal mapping of what he's feeling, what his difficulties are, and how he can resolve that within. When we shut down boys and their ability to feel emotions and connect with those emotions, then we shut down an intelligence building process that's helping them know how to solve their own internal problems. Having boys conditioned to cut off their emotions has created a lot of damage inside of the developmental process of men. Now, when they're very young, they'll express their feelings. They might cry, they might have a tantrum, they might become really upset. But over time, as they're chastised, ridiculed, humiliated, shunned, or disciplined, they will begin to shut down those feelings, shut down that connection to the felt self, to the sensory self. It's for survival. It's for their ability to stay in good company with their caretakers. If their caretakers are requiring them to show themselves as what they deem as strong, which would mean a non-emotional child, then they will do that in order to be in good favor with their parents or whoever their caregivers are. No boy wants to be ridiculed and to be treated like there's something wrong with them. So the minute that somebody makes fun of them for their emotions, they will learn to hide those emotions and keep them to themselves. It's quite unfair to the child who's just expressing his truth. Over time, when boys experience ridicule or harshness or punishments or discipline in ways that can hurt or harm them emotionally or psychologically, they will have emotions rise up, but having to repress them, they'll keep repressing them until eventually they can't and they explode, or they will create an alternate way of coping that can be destructive to someone else or something else or to themselves. And so this is why it's very, very dangerous to not allow boys and men to actually be in touch with their emotions and their feelings. They won't know how to have intimacy with themselves or with anyone else. When you're not able to develop your emotional self, you're not able to develop the part of your internal self that makes you strong and resilient and flexible and know what right action is. You don't have an inner place of knowing and intuition. You don't have a gut response. It's almost as if they go through this experience of self-annihilation by denying their emotional field and emotional knowledge. It's a self-annihilation ritual that they go through over and over and over again of denying themselves. So what comes out of a person that has done that countless times is the annihilation of others. It disassociates them from an internal knowing which has an accountability. It knows, oh gee, I know how things hurt, I know how things feel, so I don't want to do that to another. It removes that. So now annihilating something else or someone else becomes very easy for a person like that because they're already practicing the ritual of self-annihilation. And a person who's been removed from knowing themselves internally will only have the options in front of them of knowing themselves through accomplishment, performance, getting titles, winning competitions, whatever trials in front of them. They will externally focus on being the best at that because inside of themselves they know that they're lacking the ability to really internally develop themselves, so they will just develop everything externally. And once you're in a situation like that where your entire world around you is externally developed, you generally develop narcissism because you don't have the ability to feel for yourself. Therefore, you don't have the ability to feel for others. And you can fall victim to self-grandiosity because your ego has told you how great you are, how much you can annihilate others. And so you step into that embodiment that becomes your new identity, and everyone around you marvels and applauds it. What could be wrong with that, right? If everybody else around you thinks that that's okay, what's the problem? The truth is that it doesn't meet their needs. It's not meeting their needs. And they are still suffering. There is something inside of them that is still reaching out and hurting and trying, but they don't know how to fix it. I remember one day, one of my super billionaires came to me and he said, Dawn, if I were to say I had a really bad day, nobody would have compassion for me. They would all just say, oh, you have more money than you know what to do with. Why should you have any problems? And I feel that he brought this up to me because he felt safe to come to me and unburden himself emotionally and psychologically. But being that he was a child genius who went to work at the age of 14 and never stopped and became one of the world's most powerful and successful people, he is not able to go to those around him and admit the difficulties he's suffering from because everyone around him is looking up to him and trying to become him. And so a lot of men that are caught in this performance track, they don't know how to express the things that they're really suffering from and feeling. A lot of times they don't know why they suffer. In this case, the minute that this child's parents saw how intelligent he was put on a genius track. And I worked with many people who were geniuses, and they were all developed in the same ways. They were robbed of the ability to develop themselves as children. They were really robbed of a childhood completely. They weren't given the opportunity to just be and play and grow and develop naturally in their own time. They were put through rigors of accomplishment, performance, and proving themselves through testing. They're not in touch with the part of themselves that understands that it's okay to hurt, and that what you do with that feeling, how you process it, how you understand what those feelings are telling you, how you can begin to communicate with yourself internally, and how you're able to use that communication to develop a life that feels much more natural and authentic to you, so that you'll be living in harmony and inner peace, rather than just devouring everything in the world and hoping that it all makes sense eventually. So what are the coping tools that men use when they are disconnected from their emotional selves? Men learn to cope with drugs, with alcohol, with sex, with gambling, with anything that can cause an adrenaline rush to make them feel alive. Oftentimes they're giving alternate outlets like sports to be able to express their emotions and kind of let that out. Now, that does give instant relief to the child or the man who needs to express something, and this anger or rage or whatever might be coming out. The trouble is that it expresses it, but it doesn't fix it, because there's no insight into where it was even coming from and how to resolve that from inside of yourself. So you're just expressing the angst and the anger, but you're not actually resolving it from inside. But the most powerful thing that they do across the board is they make work performance the way that they know themselves, the way that everyone knows them. They're trained to be acceptable if they work for acceptance. They're not afforded unconditional acceptance and unconditional support and love, because they're taught in a patriarchal culture that they are the breadwinners and they are the ones that have to go out there and earn a living and to bring that home. They will replace intimacy with the need for validation through their work performance. And intimacy is a really important thing to have with yourself, because when you have intimacy, you have the ability to self-nurture. Intimacy is something that happens when you have an emotional relationship with yourself, when you know how much you care for yourself and you know how to care for your wounding. It's something that helps you to connect to a paternal sense within yourself, to help you care for something innocent and vulnerable. And it's a really beautiful maturation of the emotional developmental self. Intimacy is an outgrowth of what happens when a person has worked with their internal knowing and the beauty of the soul over time, and they have incredible gifting to know how to solve a problem. But when people are disconnected from their emotions and they use performance to be known, they get locked into a competitive role where everyone around them is constantly trying to compete with them and take them out. And so there is no place for intimacy. There's no place to be vulnerable, and there's no place to self-soothe. So what do men need most? Men need nurturing. Men need unconditional acceptance and love. They need the chance to be known and accepted regardless of how much they earn, what their title and status and how much power they have in the world. They need to know that they are loved beyond everything, just as they are. Men need healthy social play and engagement. They need brotherhood. They don't need the type of brotherhood that annihilates others or gets wasted together. This is not the kind of brotherhood I'm talking about. When we look at tribal culture, what we see is that men in tribal culture help each other develop physical strength, agility, knowing. They share skills. They develop one another in ways that help them further the tribe and not just themselves. And this is the difference. Men in our culture, they're taught narcissism, they're taught self-interest. But when you look at tribal culture, men are taught to be accountable, socially responsible. They're taught to play in healthy ways that can give them knowledge and skills. Men also need time with themselves. They need time to be in a situation where there's not demands, where there's not people having expectations all around them, where they can be in silence and they can be in peace and they don't have a schedule every second of the day. Men need calm, loving partners who will listen and be present with them as they unburden themselves and their heart. They need people who can hear what their suffering is. They need people who can feel how they need to be loved and nurtured and know that that is something that you want to encourage for him. And men need to know how to nurture themselves and feel compassion for themselves rather than self-hatred and deprecation and failure. There's so much shame that a man can feel when he feels that he's a failure. There are so many ways that a man can shut down psychologically and emotionally their best moments for growth because they will perceive something that is just a false doctrine. Failure is a false doctrine. There is no such thing. There's only trying. There's only learning and growth. It's really important for us to help men understand that they are free to develop themselves in a way that has nothing to do with their performance, and that their validity is not tied to their performance. Men, you are valid. You are a beautiful human being. You're a beautiful soul. You do not have to perform for validation. You are valid as you are. It is such an honor for a man to come to you with how they feel. And it's an opportunity for you to help them process what is available to them as an outcome. And you want all of these outcomes to be something that are not harsh, that don't create more pain, and instead will allow him to grieve whatever was experienced, accept and see what he did, accept that responsibility, and learn to grow beyond that. Learn to find a different way forward, one that will allow him to feel even proud of himself. But if a man makes a mistake and he comes to you and he owns that mistake and he tells you what he's done, and you see the sorrow in his heart and in his eyes, you hear the tone of the voice, you see that there is a suffering and an acknowledgement happening, then that's not the time to annihilate this person. That's the time to hold space with this person, to be present with the communications coming forward. That is not the time to focus on yourself and your own reactions. That's the time to allow this man to really grow spiritually and emotionally with you, to tell you the truth and why he made these decisions and what he's suffering from, so that you together can make a decision to help heal that suffering and close that gap. Any mistake a human being makes can be forgiven, it can be understood, and you can move beyond it. But what's important to understand is that men are suffering at incredible levels, and they don't necessarily know how to fix that because they've been conditioned to shut off their emotions and perform for validation. And that way of working with a human being just creates a machine. It creates something that will eventually break down and break apart and won't really know what went wrong. No matter how powerful a person is, no matter how wealthy a person is, no matter how rich or poor a person is, every single human being on this planet has the same needs. The needs for self-love, validation, unconditional acceptance of themselves, and to be accepted. And no matter what is in your bank account, you need to know that your emotions matter and that your feelings matter, and that whatever you feel is absolutely valid, and there's a process that you can take to help yourself know yourself more intimately and empathically. we need to create a space for men to step into that can help them to get in touch with the sacred part of their spirit and part of their body, the part of themselves that knows their innocence, that is in touch with their vulnerability, that knows themselves beyond what everybody else wanted them to be. Because if you're living a life that the mainstream culture has conditioned you to live, then you can feel what you're missing. You know that what this experience is, it's not satisfying. It's missing that soul. It's missing the feeling, the part of the emotional self. All relationships are born from how well someone knows themselves. And the best way to do that is to really know what we suffer from, how we really feel about things in the world, how we really want to build our lives together with others, and getting in touch with what you've been through, what trauma you might have to process, what experience has made you confused or left you behind in some way. That's the part that I have always worked with men, because they need to know that there are safe people in the world who can help them process their pain, that help them get in touch with the things they might have repressed or pushed away, and order that they can know what those communications were. What was it that your body was trying to tell you? What was it that you were feeling? And how can you resolve that from within? How can you see a life for yourself that feels more whole, more pure, more vibrant than how you're living? This is why getting in touch with what you need most is so important. That's all work that can be done through processing empathically. If you're a man and you don't know how to process your emotions, you don't know how to get in touch with that part of yourself, and you don't know how to set up a life that begins feeling nurturing to you and has situations that can be nurturing to you, then please reach out. I'll be happy to assist you. You can contact me through my website and sign up for a session. I would love to be able to help anyone who wants to deepen in the relationship with themselves and with the world around them. Thank you so much for listening. Please leave in the comment section below anything you would like me to cover next, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Be well.